The death was ruled accidental. The physical findings were inconsistent with that determination. During the autopsy, a complex skull fracture was detected, suggesting blunt force trauma as the primary cause of death. This finding contradicted the initial ruling and prompted an extensive review of the circumstances surrounding the deceased's final moments. A thorough examination revealed multiple fractures to the cranial vault, indicative of significant impact forces. The presence of hemorrhaging beneath the dura mater confirmed traumatic brain injury. Additional forensic evidence, including witness statements and environmental factors, was scrutinized for inconsistencies. These findings necessitated a reclassification of the death from accidental to homicide, highlighting the critical role of meticulous examination in establishing accurate cause and manner of death. Chapter: Case background. The incident under investigation occurred at a residential property in downtown Richmond on October 15th, at approximately 9:45 p.m. The initial report was made by a neighbor who noticed unusual activity outside the residence and decided to check on the welfare of the occupants. Upon entering the premises through an unlocked door, the caller discovered the deceased lying motionless on the living room floor. There were no immediate signs of forced entry or struggle within the home, leading the individual to believe that the situation was accidental in nature. The neighbor immediately contacted emergency services, and upon arrival, responding officers observed a clear disturbance in the environment, including overturned furniture and disarrayed personal belongings. The deceased displayed visible injuries indicative of blunt force trauma, prompting an immediate assessment for life signs which were absent. Given these circumstances, authorities secured the scene pending further investigation by forensic specialists. Chapter: Initial findings upon arrival at the scene. First responders observed an individual lying supine on a concrete surface outside a residential building. The deceased was male and approximately 45 years of age based on preliminary assessment. No visible signs of life were present, and there were no immediate witnesses to report any events leading up to the incident. Initial observations noted a significant laceration on the left temporal region of the scalp, with evidence of underlying hematoma. Additionally, the body displayed rigor mortis in varying stages, indicating death had occurred several hours prior to discovery. The scene was cordoned off, and emergency medical services were contacted. However, due to the absence of vital signs and the severity of apparent trauma, no resuscitation attempts were initiated. Based on these preliminary findings, the initial manner of death was classified as homicide pending further investigation. Notably, there were no defensive wounds or signs of a struggle at the scene, which suggested potential foul play. This classification prompted immediate notification to law enforcement and subsequent referral for forensic examination, including detailed autopsy procedures. Chapter: Forensic investigation. Upon arrival at the scene, investigators secured a sterile environment around the deceased to prevent contamination of potential evidence. Forensic teams meticulously documented the location and position of the body, using photography and detailed sketches. A variety of physical evidence was collected from the immediate vicinity of the deceased, including several broken objects that could be associated with blunt force trauma injuries sustained by the victim. Notably, a heavy decorative item near the head area of the deceased showed signs of impact consistent with the inflicted injuries. Additionally, personal items belonging to the deceased were inventoried and placed in evidence bags with unique identifiers for tracking through the chain of custody. A set of blood-stained clothing was also secured, displaying patterns indicative of defensive wounds. All collected evidence was sealed and transported directly to the forensic laboratory for further analysis under strict protocols, ensuring integrity and confidentiality throughout processing and examination. Computed tomography, CT, scans revealed multiple comminuted fractures of the cranial vault, consistent with blunt force trauma. Microscopic examination of bone fragments indicated linear and stellate patterns typical of high-impact injuries from a solid object. Hematoxylin and eosin staining confirmed hemorrhagic extravasation in the subdural space, indicative of acute traumatic injury. Biochemical analysis of cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, samples showed elevated levels of S100B protein at 2.5 ng/ml, surpassing the threshold for severe brain damage. Histological sections revealed diffuse axonal injuries with myelin sheath disruptions and neuronal cell swelling in the frontal cortex. These findings corroborate a fatal blunt force injury to the head, resulting in traumatic intracranial hemorrhage and significant cerebral trauma. Forensic examination revealed that the deceased sustained multiple blunt force injuries, consistent with a single traumatic event. Analysis of blood spatter patterns and distribution indicated a struggle occurred at the primary scene, corroborated by DNA evidence found on a broken object at the location. Radiological imaging confirmed a comminuted skull fracture indicative of significant impact from a heavy, irregularly shaped implement. Microscopic examination of abrasions on the deceased's skin suggested contact with rough surfaces during the incident. Soil samples and pollen analysis provided an approximate postmortem interval of 24 to 36 hours, based on environmental conditions at the time of death. This timeline confirmed that the injuries were sustained prior to death and contradicted initial witness accounts, suggesting a prolonged period of distress before fatal injury. The presence of a depressed skull fracture with comminuted bone fragments indicates significant blunt force trauma to the head. Radiographic analysis confirmed the extent and location of intracranial hemorrhage, correlating directly with areas of impact identified in the external examination. The pattern of injury suggests a substantial force applied over a limited area consistent with a weapon such as a hammer or crowbar. This evidence is conclusive regarding the mechanism of death. However, determining the exact sequence of events requires interpretation based on additional contextual clues from the scene and potential witness statements. Under oath, an expert would confirm these findings, while noting that further corroborative evidence is necessary to establish definitive cause and manner of death beyond reasonable doubt. Chapter Resolution. The final determination in this case of blunt force trauma is a definitive skull fracture as the primary cause of death for the deceased. Evidence gathered through comprehensive forensic investigation, including detailed autopsy findings and corroborative external examinations, conclusively proves that significant blunt force impact to the head resulted in fatal intracranial injury. Establishing the central finding involved meticulous analysis of cranial imaging data, revealing multiple fractures with sharp edges indicative of direct trauma. These findings were substantiated by microscopic examination of bone fragments, showing evidence of recent fracture lines and associated hemorrhaging within brain tissue consistent with acute traumatic impact. Initially, there was speculation regarding potential alternative causes, such as falls or vehicular accidents, due to the presence of minor contusions elsewhere on the body. However, a reevaluation of all available data, including witness statements and environmental evidence, confirmed the likelihood of an intentional assault causing the fatal injury. This change in assessment underscores the importance of thorough forensic analysis in ruling out less severe injuries that may distract from more significant findings. This case underscores the critical role of advanced imaging techniques in diagnosing and classifying blunt force trauma-induced skull fractures, highlighting the necessity for meticulous documentation and interdisciplinary collaboration among forensic pathologists, radiologists, and legal authorities to ensure comprehensive analysis and accurate reconstruction of events. This change in assessment underscores the importance of thorough forensic analysis in ruling out less severe injuries that may distract from more significant findings. The file remains open.